Thank you for joining us. I am pleased to be joined by Assemblyman Andrew Hevesi, who you will hear from, as well as Randi Bregman from Vera House and Beth Frey from the Samaritan Center. I want to thank all of you for making time to come out this morning on the day before Thanksgiving, which is a very busy day, to come and listen to us talk about an incredibly important proposal that the Assemblyman has put forward to try to deal with the pernicious effects and prevent homelessness. As many of you here know, we in the city and in cooperation with the county have been doing extraordinary work on providing services to our homeless populations. But what we have realized very quickly, and you will, I think, hear both Randi and Beth, as well as the Assemblyman talk about this, that once a person or family becomes homeless, it is catastrophic to them personally, but also to our community. And so all that we can do as policymakers to prevent the addition of people becoming homeless is a welcome impact for our community and for our society. We have been talking about this issue in depth for a very long time, and I also want to take this time to say that the solutions that we have put forward, which have gotten great attention from the White House and other advocacy groups, have really been because we have been able to form meaningful partnerships. But what we have seen as we have sat down month after month and sometimes week after week addressing these issues is that there is a growing number of people who are holding on by their fingertips. And that if we do not do more from a public policy perspective, that we are going to be inundated with homeless people, and that would be destructive to the very fabric of our society. A couple of months ago, Andrew Hevesi came to see me to talk to me about this issue, and he talked about a new and innovative plan that is called the Housing Stability Support. And I will let the Assemblyman talk in depth about the details of this program. But to be succinct, the Housing Stability Support, or HSS, would replace current rent supports for individuals and families on public assistance into a new rent supplement, which would then bridge the gap of the shelter allowance and 85% of the market rate. Then we as localities would have the option of extending this into a full fair market rent. In lay terms, what this would mean to the people of the city of Syracuse is that if your family is receiving public assistance and cannot afford to pay your rent, your city and your state would be able to help you keep you in your home. And we would make up that difference. Because again, we know that it's much easier to deal with the issues and the problems when people are in their homes with their support systems and networks. And that once people become homeless, it becomes catastrophic for everyone involved. This often would mean the difference between a child being transferred to schools for multiple times in a single year to having a family be able to think about taking care of themselves and their families and not worried about being in a street or in a shelter and how to move from there. It would also mean that a mother with children would not have to stay at home and experience domestic violence and would be able to live her life independently with her children in a place where she and her family would be safe. It would also help families establish sound financial footing, another welcome asset to this. I say this as the mayor of a city who has an unacceptably high poverty rate, and these are not just dull statistics to those of us who work in the city of Syracuse. These are real lives, families, and children. And that's why I was so grateful that the Assemblyman came to me with this idea and asked for my support to help solve this problem in a very proactive way. Because the best public service is just that. It's providing service for the public, and in this case, a public that desperately needs to have assistance so that we can move all of our community forward. So with that, I would like to take this opportunity to invite to the microphone Assemblyman Hevesi, who can talk to you about the details. And again, I would just like to thank him for driving up on the day before Thanksgiving to address this very important issue. Welcome, as always, to Syracuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Meyer. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. This endorsement of the mayor is incredibly impactful on a number of levels. Let me start by saying that the mayor has been an incredible advocate for the homeless, particularly homeless veterans. Her work on homeless veterans has been nationally renowned, and also by establishing a new model on how you deal with homelessness in Syracuse is a model that other localities should follow. That cooperation between law enforcement and social services and homeless individuals and families is really remarkable. I'd like to commend you on that. So we are in the midst of the worst homeless crisis since the Great Depression. We have estimated that there are 150,000 children in New York State who don't have a place to stay. They're living on somebody else's couch or they are homeless with their families. And the problem for us is that the numbers just continue to grow. They're soaring. Last year, New York State reported to the federal government that 19,000 more people became homeless than stopped being homeless, which indicates to us that this is an absolutely unsustainable model. We have to have a policy shift that enables us to keep people in their home. In addition, I will tell you that the federal government came out with a study several weeks ago that said the best way to stop homelessness is a long-term rental subsidy, which is what we're proposing here. The shelter allowance that the state gives to people on public assistance has not been raised significantly in decades. It is woefully inadequate and doesn't come close to having people stay in their homes or achieve the ability, the rent, the ability to pay the rent that they're supposed to. So basically, the shelter allowance is in violation of the social services statute, which indicates that if you're going to take care of a child in the home and worry about that child's mental health and moral well-being, that you have to be able to, the state has to be able to provide a rental supplement that keeps them in their home and not force thousands of children, and in our case, 150,000 children into homelessness. So what we're proposing here today is a new program called the Home Stability Support, which is a rental supplement that is targeted to 80,000 individuals and families who are on public assistance, who are facing eviction, who are currently homeless, or they are losing their housing due to domestic violence or hazardous conditions. And domestic violence, unfortunately, is the second leading driver of homelessness. We need to do better on two fronts. One, for the families and children and individuals who we are allowing to languish homeless in New York today, we have to provide them the ability to start their lives over and become self-sufficient. And second, we need to save taxpayers money. Our current policy of sheltering tens of thousands of individuals is exponentially more expensive to the taxpayers of the state. We are spending 3 or 4 times more than we need to shelter individuals when providing a fraction of the cost, ability for them to stay in their homes would be that much cheaper. So that's what we're proposing today. I'd like to thank the mayor for her leadership and her support, which is incredibly important. Our coalition is continuing to grow. And with that, I'd like to introduce Randi Bregman from the Vera Center. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for coming out today. I want to start by expressing my appreciation to both the mayor and the assemblymen for being willing to put their voices out there on behalf of those who are homeless, and particularly those of you who know the work of Vera House here in this community, individuals who are homeless due to domestic violence. One of the greatest challenges we have for individuals who come into our shelter, we typically shelter between 400 and 500 individuals a year, and about half of those people are children, many of them under the age of 5. So echoing the remarks you heard earlier, they'll come into our shelter, get an order of protection, establish some of the things they need to establish, and be ready to move on and out and create a stable home for their families. But to find safe, affordable housing in our city is the greatest challenge we face to help people exit our shelter. Many of the other systems we need in place are there. Criminal justice system for those who choose it, the civil justice system, but this issue of safe, affordable housing for people to transition from shelter is serious, it's real, and it affects lives. And in addition, we often get calls on our 24-hour support line from individuals who are unsafe, don't want to come into a shelter, but are trying to figure out how they can possibly move themselves and their families to a safe, stable environment without having apartments that they can afford based on their current shelter allowance. So they may stay in an unsafe situation, or they may enter an apartment that's not safe and inappropriate because they don't have access to the resources they need. So from the Vera House perspective, on behalf of the hundreds we serve every year, we want to express our heartfelt gratitude as we head into Thanksgiving to the mayor, to the assembly member, and to all those we hope will help advocate for passage of this change in policy this year. Thank you. I now have the honor and privilege of introducing a good friend and colleague in this work to try and address issues of poverty and those who are left at the margins of our society. I want to welcome the Executive Director of the Samaritan Center, Beth Frey.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you all for being here to hear about this incredibly important initiative and to hear about the folks that are struggling right here in our community. The Samaritan Center is a community meal site that serves really the gamut of folks that are struggling. We see every day our homeless folks who are, as Randy said, stuck in the shelter, trying to find and access housing that will allow them to move on to the next point in their life. Very often they are couch surfing or sleeping in cars because there isn't that affordable housing there, and there isn't the resources to allow them to take that next step. We see people that are one paycheck away from becoming homeless, and what they find is they're using so much of their income to try to stay in housing that they then don't have money for food. They don't have money for all the other things that it takes to really put together a quality life. So this would allow them to then really put all the pieces of the puzzle together to be really productive and active members of the society. And then I think we see every day, as the mayor had said, the catastrophic effect of someone who has lost their housing. I think you can't imagine the disruption to a child who, when they find this grounding and they find this foundation at school with teachers and a support network, suddenly has that taken away from them, and they're suddenly in a shelter trying to figure out what life is now. This initiative would help those kids stay connected to school that then determines very much their future, right? There's folks that once they end in the shelter, it begins this really snowball effect of loss of network, support, services, community, and it becomes harder and harder and harder to break out of that and to get back to where you want to be working. When you apply for a job, you can't leave a shelter address, right? If you're in a home, at least you have the opportunity to say, I have this stable home. I can then work forward from there. There's folks every day that lose their jobs because they've lost their home and can't get to their employment. So while this is incredibly complex, right, there's a reason that there's a whole theory of housing first. Housing starts the foundation of what allows people to then carry on a very successful life and start to put those pieces together. So this initiative is incredibly important to help the thousands that are struggling in our community today.
Thank you, Mary Beth and Randy. I just want to thank you particularly. I think it's appropriate on this day before Thanksgiving that we give thanks for all of the terrific work that you do to make our community stronger and better. And of course, thank the Assemblyman for coming here and leading the charge on this very important piece of public policy. With that, I would be happy to open it up to any questions that any of the media has for any one of us.
Mr. Hevesi, just a political end.
Sure.
I mean, where is it? What are the chances of moving forward? Are there roadblocks?
So the goal of the exercise is to have this become part of the budget discussions in Albany. I'm going to have a conversation with the governor, hopefully to convince him to put it in the executive budget. In the absence of that, I will be pushing to have the Assembly included in their one-house budget. And I've also had conversations with senators as well. So I'd say the prospects are very good. I will be announcing in the coming weeks a broad coalition of Assembly members, an incredibly broad coalition of Assembly members from both sides of the aisle. And we're going to continue the drumbeat to push this as part of the upcoming budget negotiations. Sorry.
Allowances woefully inadequate. It didn't just happen. It's been years in the making. Why do you think it's almost reached this tipping point, and why didn't this happen sooner?
It's a good question. So in 1975, the shelter allowance was created, and that changed the public policy after the Great Depression. 2 seconds of history, I don't want to go on too long. After the Great Depression, people on public assistance had their rents paid in full. In 1975, the state shifted the public policy to create the shelter allowance, which has differential rents for different sizes of families in different regions. It made sense at the time. The problem is the state has not kept up increasing the shelter allowance. So for right now in Onondaga County, the shelter allowance is $303. The fair market rent for, $303 for a two-bedroom apartment. The federal government estimates their fair market rent is somewhere $808, and we know that that's even low. So people are not able to make rents. The reason why we're addressing it now is because we've come to critical mass. The state has not been doing its job for decades. It's even been sued on not increasing the shelter allowance. And finally, we're saying enough is enough. We have to change the policy, which will in turn not only save tens of thousands of households, including children, but also save taxpayers lots of money.
Mayor, even to get this money, is there a safe and affordable housing in Syracuse as an issue for these folks?
No, there's not, but that's another, we're working on that as well with the state, and Paul Driscoll and I talk about it all the time, and there's a lot of programs and partnerships that we have with Housing Visions, with the Division for Housing and Community Renewal. So we are building more housing. We're talking to the Rescue Mission is going to be building more housing. There is not enough supply, clearly. But part of what I have seen, both anecdotally and then looking at the data objectively, is that when you have so many people who are holding on, and I have people who call me monthly to say to me, Mayor, I know of 6 families who say that they are 1 month away from being homeless. What can we do? If we keep them in their houses, if we help them with this HHS support, that will be fewer people who are in this catastrophic position. We can focus on getting the children health care, get them educated, give them stability in school, get the families the kind of support so that they need. Again, part of this is, with all of these issues, there are many, they're multi-pronged, and you have to have multi-pronged solutions. This is one prong. It is easier to help and make people's lives better if we keep them in their homes, and this will help do that. Anybody else? Any questions? All right, thank you all very much. Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe out there. Thank you. Thank you. Assemblyman Bregman.